go. All right, welcome to, oh, gotta admit someone else. Welcome to a hallway hangout. Welcome, we have so many Pauls. This is wonderful. Hello, we're just kicking off with the recording. Welcome to a hallway hangout about all things media. This is basically just a casual place to talk through current happenings. In this specific instance, we're actually going at FSE through a very specific angle of media, which I think is kind of cool because it really is pervasive across all sorts of site building experiences and such a key part of creating, in my opinion, like a really compelling site. And it's something that I think we've gotten spoiled with social media. And so I think it's very interesting to think about how we can improve things in the website building realm, especially when we think about the open web. And then we have projects like Openverse and the WordPress photo directory that are happening that I think it's even more important and more high impact to dig into this stuff now. And Francisco is a designer who is working on Openverse. So he's also here to listen and learn, which I'm really, really excited about. Thank you so much for joining. For now, also just as a reminder, you're welcome to pop in and out. Like, this is not meant, you're not trapped here. You can leave whenever. You can turn your video off, all that good stuff. I want people to feel comfortable. I like to start it off at the top with just an open floor. But so if people have something specific they want to talk with media, I want to start with that. And if not, I always have a list. So if anyone has anything, I'll give some space for now.
I have.
Hello, let's hear it.
Now, I've had to apologize because I haven't actually read what the media thing's about.
You're forgiven.
But I've been doing quite a few things recently and thinking, I wish we could do that. I visit a page and I do something. I do a screen capture of a certain area. Then I paste it into my post and it creates an image. Anyone else do that?
You paste it into your post. So you're taking a screenshot.
Do a screen capture of a certain area of the post and then I paste it straight into the post. Right. What I want to do is to be able to paste it in to the post and then give the file a name. And do the SEO stuff and potentially make it the featured image at the same time.
Ooh, I have something for you on that. Yeah.
What I also want to do is to forget that I've got an image block already and paste it into the image block and have it accept that. At the moment, I have to actually create an empty paragraph in order to paste the image in, because the image block doesn't accept images.
You can't drag and drop the image in?
I'm pasting it from the clipboard.
Interesting. I feel like I just did this like yesterday and it worked. What browser are you using?
Chrome.
Chrome, yeah, same.
Is it possible to paste it directly into any?
You can paste it directly into a paragraph, an empty paragraph block, and it creates an image. But if you try to paste it into an image, it doesn't create an image.
Ah, I see what you're saying. So pasting into an image block. Yeah, I know you're right. I pasted into a paragraph block. Yeah, pasting into an image block. Yeah, I'm taking notes. Right. That's a great. On the topic of, I'm going to share my screen real quick, of the featured image. This issue is actually one of the ones I wanted to talk about, so I'm very biased here. But this is something that, as you're just describing, like, yeah, I want to add an image and then immediately make it the featured image without having to do much. I think this is something that has come up, especially with full siting, because I think the idea of a featured image can change. And so like there's a couple use cases here where it's like a photo blog where posts contain a single image if no separate featured image exists. The first image in the post is used as the featured image, which feels really basic. And kind of Matthias jumping in, and this has come up before, which I think is pretty neat. So other folks have also been feeling this throughout, I think, as full siting has developed. And I'll scroll down to cut to the chase. Yoan, who is a designer, came up with like a brief mock-up of what this could look like. So I'm going to actually open this. So rather than having, or in the replace, normally when you hit like replace, you don't have this featured image option, but like you can imagine as a design as a possibility, being able to just select this. So like kind of as you're describing, Herb is like, okay, I paste an image in, I want it immediately to be the featured image. Imagine just hitting, I don't know if replace is the right place to put it because it's not necessarily intuitive that you would hit replace to do it, but I think it's an interesting idea where you could just set it as the featured image really quickly.
I'm not sure I quite understand this idea yet. Is this the idea that a featured image could live anywhere inside the entire post?
Yeah.
And then what about themes that use the featured image somewhere? Like maybe my query has the featured image be large on top. Would that mean that it then appears twice, or we would be kind of moving away from the idea that posts or that themes would use a large featured image like on the actual post page? It would just be embedded somewhere.
I think, well, this is I think the beauty of the featured image block is that you can add and remove it in different places. So like you could have it in multiple places if you wanted, but it would rely on the post featured image block. I think more of what it's describing is this idea of having the featured image be something that's not necessarily as separated out from everything else. So like having, maybe this is like the media and text option, or maybe like a podcast episode where it's like, this becomes the featured image. So you can set things and kind of transform them behind the scenes, if that makes sense. Rather than kind of, I think what you're thinking of is like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have like featured image scattered everywhere, which is not necessarily the intent. Where like, I can show you an example. This is at my personal site that's on FSE. So it's like, this is a featured image, very simple query loop block. But then if I click on this, there's actually no featured image in the post. So I removed it from the template. And that was just a design decision. I just didn't want it there, but I liked that I could have, you know, featured images here that have the same duotone filter that match the blue.
So
Yeah,
potentially, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, if you can go to like an individual post on your site, just as I just want to illustrate an example.
Would love to show up my site. Just kidding.
So if that PR gets approved, you could set like your header as like a cover block and set it to be the featured image. So whenever you're on an individual post, the cover block is displaying the featured image as opposed to like a static image or a color or something like that. So being able to reference the featured image in different areas gives you a lot more design flexibility in a template.
Like, imagine it's like the featured image was behind this like post title report back, which right now you can't really do right now. That's one of the things that I think is, I know I've been frustrated by, and part of why I frankly removed it was because I didn't like how it ended up looking on mobile. I was like, this looks bad. I'm removing this from the individual post. So that obviously there are still bugs here. Let me check the chat. Yeah, especially Ed, to your point, like having a backup where it's like, if there's no featured image set, how can we make sure it's just intuitive and it's just like the system automatically does it, having that as an option. Yeah, Herb, your point, I added it to the notes, but pasting into an image block, that feels really basic. And I'm surprised. I'm sure maybe there's an issue out there, but that has actually not come up yet. So it's noted for, I'll follow up on that. Stop sharing because I like to see your faces.
Yeah, well, the other one was the ability to name the image that you're pasting in rather than having it called image 1 or image 2 or whatever.
So kind of like as you add it, having something kind of prompt you to.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the first image you're pasting in and you've already given the poster a name, then maybe it should use the same name. Or wait until you save it and then goes and adjusts the name of the image file accordingly.
I think this also gets into a long-standing WordPress issue just around like media management, like in the media gallery, you know, or in the media manager, you know, people have talked about we should have folders, you know, we should be able to rename files, you know, everything in the media. And that's a tricky nut to crack because the media manager is quite complicated. But see, and I think that as we move to more FSE related things, the whole goal of full site editing is things are so simple and easy. It's going to illustrate like even more like, oh, why can't I do this? You know, whereas before everything was hard, so it didn't seem as bad. So
maybe one day the media manager will be done in blocks as well.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just another editor of forms, isn't it? You go and edit an attachment, you go and edit the caption and the description of it. You haven't got blocks there, but you should be able to.
Yeah, I think I heard or I saw some discussion related to that, like having a or treating a block like potentially for filling with a color or putting an image. So instead of the image concept is basically one block that has content that looks like an image, but basically it is block image every time.
Yeah. This also ties into, I think it was Paul who brought it up, but there's like how can we also include patterns in this too? So whether it's seeing an image in your media library embedded in a pattern that you're looking through to make it more personalized. Like I know if I let's say I have an image on my post and then I go to hit the transform menu, what patterns can I see that pull that image in where I can actually see what it looks like? And then also integrating it with the media library. So I know that was one of the things. I'm going to share my screen again. But I was like, I wasn't sold on this at first. I was like, I don't know, like this is, but I'm like, well, actually like patterns are really important, and having patterns in a way that, like I said, the biggest drawback is that's terribly redundant. And so like, imagine adding a pattern, replacing an image in the pattern by opening a mirror library and then you face the same patterns. It's like too much. But also it's a neat entry point. And right now, I mean, I was building a site the other day just for fun and I forgot about patterns. Like I fully was doing everything manually and I was like, dang it.
That's
like
heresy.
Right.
That is heresy.
Yeah, like, yeah, it was like, it took me like halfway through where I was like, oh crap, I should have done this. But it's a neat idea. It's like, you know, what if you could preview images in a particular pattern? And I'm not sure what the UI could look like for it, but you know, maybe Francisco with Openverse, it's like, how do we combine the pattern directory and Openverse?
Yeah, I think
It's almost like you're talking about the ability to switch between patterns. Very much in the way, you know, before we had patterns, they built the image and text block, right? And you could quickly switch between these different things. What if there was a way to switch between patterns so that you could quickly go through, especially if the patterns become more robust in the future?
And the query loop block has that built in, that little modal when you add a query loop and you're kind of clicking through. It's pretty rudimentary, but like that is, there's a couple interesting like designs there when it comes to the transform menu, where it's like, how can you actually switch through these different options? I totally agree. I think it'd be really, really cool. Especially the personalization piece, like whether it's Openverse or your own images. I think there's something there because if you can't see your own image in it, like it's not as compelling. Whereas when I find, at least as someone who loves images, I love to see my own stuff in there already, especially if the dimensions are a little bit different. Maybe the pattern won't work, or you'll have to crop it in a certain way and you want to see that ahead of time. Yeah. I'm gonna add that as a note.
That was a challenge for me recently with setting dimensions. I set the width of the featured image and then I previewed another theme, and of course the width of the featured image was now completely different from the width of the column that was being displayed in the new theme.
Oh, so cross theme featured image dimensions changing. Yeah. Yeah. That kind of ties into the standardization stuff with font sizes and colors too. Featured image. I actually found that whenever I switched to 2022 on my personal site is some of my featured images that previously made sense. I kind of had to just cut my losses and change the size that I wanted and roll with it. Oh yeah, totally. Here, I need to give you permission. No one do anything wild or I'm going to kick you out. I'm just kidding. Go ahead and share, Ed.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. And I work in kind of digital publishing in SUNY. That's part of what I do. And so we tend to use Pressbooks a lot, which is a book publishing built on top of WordPress multi-site, kind of converts a WordPress multi-site into a book library. But because it's so integrated with book publishing, one of the things they've done is they've started to include attributions in the media library. And I saw one of the ideas that was being floated around here was both how to integrate Openverse and what would you do if some attributions was more connected to the media. And I just thought that this was a really simple yet really nice way that we've already got kind of mocked up in WordPress of how that might look. And maybe it's up to the author of the page how this gets, but having these blankies that you can fill in, so to speak, already, and maybe with the Openverse integration that comes in pre-filled, and then maybe it's part of the image block that we could show that attribution, that could be a really slick way that both encourages best practice when using open materials, but not in a way that's so cumbersome that like it's permanently watermarked or permanently attached to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we have been thinking in the channel that ways to make that process more easy. So you insert an image and then you pull out directly all the attribution information. But I think that it's key to be very clear that that information, in some cases, you cannot delete it because it is required for certain licenses. So it's maybe you can change the style, of course, to match the theme style in general, but in some cases you cannot delete it, or you are deleting the whole images, or you cannot crop the image, for instance, or no, maybe crop you can do it, but apply a duotone effect, for instance, because that can be can mean making a reuse of the content and doing a new content from this one. And in some cases, it is not allowed. So I think that's the inserting part. It relates a lot with what you are saying, because that's a very good idea. But then it's
the only thing that I would push back on you a little bit is in the Creative Commons license, it tells me that I can attribute in the way that makes sense for my current format and my current use.
Right.
So like, I would hate to see it that like the caption for the photo is always the Creative Commons license and you can never change it, because maybe I want to include it at the bottom as like, maybe like almost like a footnote, you know, like I should be able to change a little bit in that display to match my current uses. So if it was too hard coded in there, that it could become frustrating for me kind of in the overall design.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Yeah, it makes sense, especially in some cases where you are, I don't know, you have a whole gallery and you want to display a list of images, and then you want to add or have in the about page where it's showing all the attribution requirement information. That makes more sense than instead of having cut all the lists with the attribution information. Yeah, that might frustrate some users.
That's such an interesting problem to solve for. My brain just like whoa, how do you do that? And maybe it's like using the different styles. Like I'm trying to imagine like what it could look like where you add an image from Openverse and then there's maybe like, are you using it to do this, and it's pre-built in the styles section for the block. I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine like what would be the easiest way to do, right? Because I know I've been using Pexels a lot and uploading photos there. Now I'm uploading to the WordPress direct photo library. I'm like, yes, finally, for the directory. But it's very interesting because if you download a photo from Pexels, it basically you have to like copy and paste. Like I got this image from this person, and it's really even that small step. Sometimes I'm just like, and I just move on, which is not good. You know, it's like, you know, it's one of those things where if it was easier, if it was baked in, I do think it would be. Especially if I'm mid writing a post, I don't always think to add it in, and having it pulled in would be pretty cool.
And even like, you know, CC0 posts don't need to be attributed.
Right.
But I like to attribute CC0 posts to let people know that I am doing it correctly.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I wonder also if how when you are inserting an image that, I don't know, a photo that was taken by you and you want to maybe have the option to upload it to the photo directory directly. Or how is that flow if you want to contribute to feeding this catalog from the editor? I don't know how that experience sounds like.
It's funny because to me, I would love like the lowest barrier to entry because I love sharing my photos. Like I don't think twice about it and don't care how people use them.
Mhm.
But then I know for other people that would be horrifying. It'd be like, I don't, you know, like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like having that balance. It's almost like I wish there was a way to, I mean, maybe it's like a preference setting. I don't know, like some way where it's like difficulty setting. It's like really ask me, it's like ask me every time, never ask me again. Like that kind of vibe. I think could be kind of interesting. But then also there are
Right.
some photos I upload that are like crappy photos of, you know, with my phone of like with my friends where I'm like, I don't really think we can add this to the WordPress directory. But then there's other
Right.
ones where I'm using my nice camera and it's like, it'd be nice to have them included.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And also being very clear that you are submitting one image instead of your whole catalog in the media. That's
Yeah,
also,
that's true.
yeah, you're not submitting everything. You're just one image. That's,
Mhm.
that's
Which
crucial.
that gets into bulk upload, which is something that
Yeah.
is like an interesting pain point right now. I have a bug with the photo directory currently where I have, you can upload up to 5 and 4 of mine are taken with like broken, basically it's like broken uploads. I need to get them reset. Yeah. So that's another thing to tie it to is like, how do you tie it to the WordPress org profile? Like correctly, depending upon your user account.
Right.
It's like almost like some authorization has to happen. Especially if I have like, let's say I have 10 WordPress sites and I want all of them and they're all from me and I want them all to feed into the same
Right. Yeah.
profile. I'm probably an edge case there.
But it sounds interesting to be able to log into a kind of like a central unit and to get access to one's own images when you use on another site.
Yeah, Paul, you were talking about that where it's like, could Openverse be the place where you can manage all your media?
Right. Because I'm kind of looking at the when we expand to look at patterns today, I added the video I added on the feedback there was kind of like, if one clicks to expand to see patterns, maybe one doesn't need a pattern, maybe one just needs an image. So be able to kind of click another tab to kind of see images or have like a central Moodle that shows up with all different media, but you have the whatever active that you, if you selected to expand to see patterns, you will have that active. But you should be able to, within the same media Moodle, be able to select other kinds of media. Because maybe you don't want patterns, maybe you want something else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like when you're inserting an image too into WordPress, it opens a Moodle thing for the media library and kind of you select the image. If you're able to kind of go through, just select other kinds of media, and then you have a central place, a Moodle that kind of shows up for the media hub. I call it media hub because it's not really in the media library anymore. It's a media hub because it's not just local, it's also external. And if we'll also do a kind of like a login feature that you all automatically logged into your account, you can share with other sites. You can add other sites to it, or that's kind of like more advanced. But it suddenly becomes a huge media hub for the images that one use.
Yeah, and then you run
there's
into
a
like,
lot of
are we
possibilities.
doing Google Drive? Like at what point, you know, do we have limits to how much people can upload if they're managing? Like, I'm like, cool, I don't want to use Apple for storage for my images anymore. You know?
Well, it sounds like I don't know, like a small catalog or sub-album of the photo directory in terms of the interface and how you manage the photos. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking of Google Photos and I like to see all the whole catalog that you have of your photos, and then you go to an album, specific one, where you are seeing more, and you can control the permissions and where, or maybe link which sites have those photos embed. So I don't know, I'm just thinking in terms of the interface and how you interact with the photos, rather than saying that you have all your photos in the catalog, because that's not the case.
Right.
In the photo
Actually,
directory, sorry.
A few years ago in the media channel, we were kind of doing some research in improving the media library. And I have an old Google Doc from maybe 3-4 years ago, which I'm looking at various other services, from Google and other places. I'll just share that in the testing as a feedback.
That'd be
there.
awesome. Yeah.
Because one can just look at other services, as I said, Google and others. What does it look like? How do others do it? How can we do something like that in WordPress?
Right.
That also brings up a question of have you all, or what stands out from other services that you use, whether it's like social media or software around media, that you find to be really intuitive and easy to use? Like I keep thinking about like how it feels like media across varying, I'm thinking mainly social media, has gotten easier and easier in a way that like when I have friends try to use a WordPress site, they're like, what? Why can't I do this with this image? Like it's funny to watch. And I think like things like duotone makes a lot of sense to folks like that, where other people in the WordPress community were like, why is duotone in core? And it's very interesting to see the split, almost like it feels almost like generationally. And I know I just had someone say, I was talking to a friend about TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. She was like, TikTok's video tools are horrible. Like it's so hard to edit videos, which I found very interesting since that's the whole shebang at TikTok.
Right.
Hey, Courtney. But yeah, I was curious if folks had other experiences where it was either really positive or negative using different tools.
Well, I do think that in relation to Openverse, right? I mean, the whole idea, right, is to have a photo library at people's fingertips from within WordPress. And you see this a lot in other website platforms like Squarespace and Wix. The benefit there, of course, is they have paid partnerships with things like, with photo services. So that process is inherently smoother because there's a paid connection between the two. So we don't have to worry about all this attribution stuff and things like that. So I do think that this implementation, not specifically image editing, but like the open source integration, is inherently going to be harder to do in WordPress than some of these other programs that are paid, because ours needs to be open source and have all those considerations for attribution and whatnot.
It's almost like, how do you make attributions cool? Like I've noticed the thing happen more and more where more of my friends are doing captions for accessibility, and it's become like normalized. Even on like major TikTok folks, it'll even have like the generated captions, which is really cool. So it's almost like, how do you switch it where the open source side or like the more accessible side becomes the default and the norm, and if you don't do it, it's weird. Like,
I've noticed Google Docs nudging us towards accessibility in small, interesting ways. And my example is I cut and paste a gnarly link, like one of those 3-line links into Google Docs, and it just popped up a little modal and it said, hey, this is a pretty long link. Would you like to replace it with the title of this web page to automatically prompt me to make the descriptive link? And I was like, ooh,
you're like, yes, I do.
I saw Microsoft Word doing that the other day because I'm sponsored by GoDaddy for some contribution time, and we use Office 365 and everything we do, and even images in there. It will put a gray bar under the image that we bring in and is like, would you like to add the alt text to this? And I thought that was fantastic. I am on the training team and help on the stuff on Learn, and I'm doing a call for testing on Friday. So sorry I couldn't join sooner. But that said, so the call for testing I'll do through GoDaddy tomorrow or Friday to really help elevate and promote. But one of the things I was noticing regarding captions, there's always the debate in accessibility. Well, if the caption is there, do we need the alt text or not? And Alex Stein, who is one of the reps for accessibility, is fully blind and filed a MetaTrack ticket because the images in photos.org/photos don't have the alt text, and it's just coming up like his screen reader is reading a number, just a number to him. And I'm thinking about what the implications are if we make it easier for folks to bring those images right into a post in .org or on wherever they are. If they have an easy way to retrieve those photos, the nuances of, do we have captions? Do we have alts? What's the right case for which? And what happens if somebody if they erase a caption what then happens for people that are using screen readers.
Mhm.
Just hanging out with Alex, by the way, has made me that much more thoughtful. Like hanging out on casual Zoom calls has made me that much more thoughtful about what concerns we have.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one that I've been thinking about that, because the current, whenever I upload photos to the directory right now, it's like a description, but it's very basic. There's no nudging. There's no like, here's a best practice. It's just like, write
We're
something
getting-
in.
Mhm.
We're getting
Right.
so many more. Marcus, one of my team members directly, is one of the moderators for that area. And I think we're close to 1,500 photos, and it's just rapidly growing. Great. But that means if whatever fixes we have to like, yeah.
I'm gonna jump over to the design Zoom. It's a busy.
I might see you there.
Paul.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah.
Okay, see you later.
Bye.
Good to see you.
All right.
Yeah, no, I keep thinking about that early on, like the early experiences. Like we do need, images uploaded there, but it's like, what can we set as norms early, I think is so important. And then kind of how do you bring that into the site in a way that's really not cumbersome. And all of it ties into attribution as well. It's like, how do we get these things in place and make it normalized? I have also seen on social media, one thing that's encouraging is folks are, this happened a couple years ago, but there was like a big outcry around people reusing other people's content on like funny meme Instagram accounts. So then it became like, you have to credit who sent this to you. So I wonder if there's a way of reusing that habit that I now see. I would call it a habit now on social media, where it's very normalized for people not to steal other people's stuff. I mean, it still happens, but how can we reuse that as like a positive thing within using media for attributions, and like explaining it and the experience of that will resonate and kind of match what happens elsewhere. It's like props to so-and-so, like, is there a way of phrasing it? Like, do you want to thank the person? Here you go. And Pexels also does a cool, from time to time, I get like donations and like tips for some of the images, which is kind of neat.
Right.
It's never a lot of money, but like, it's cool. I think it's a neat way to have contributions. And if you really dedicate yourself to it, which I do not, like for photos, like it could be a neat revenue stream for folks who are contributing back to the open web in the form of like tipping.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the attribution concept rather like instead of how to say the core idea of maybe giving attribution to one content or one photo or anything, it is also recognizing the content creator. It is putting and displaying that this person upload, submit, or took this photo, instead of just putting one text caption, all our text, or I don't know, and say this is under blah 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 license. So I think there's also a potential to use Openverse somehow to show the content creator information, and to say this image that you are using for this post was made by this person, and kind of showing the provenance of that image and how many times has been used across on the web. So I think there's also maybe the idea of attribution is not just purely text, but it's also an action that shows the author and all information and the provenance. It is an idea that I have been thinking about but I don't know, it seems that it requires so many years to develop something like that, because even you can, I don't know, using an image in Instagram, and eventually it has one symbol that when you click, you see all the provenance, and it is an image that is under this condition and blah, blah, blah. So it is some way of Openverse as a search, but also showing the attribution and recognizing content creators.
I think Tumblr's reblog was the first to do this.
Right.
So there might be some technology around that we could borrow.
Yeah.
Or WordPress
I wonder who knows people.
or the press this, the little bookmarklet that isn't in anymore. It was one of the few things deprecated, but having, I don't know how to, I mean, if we're talking like having a way when you're browsing Openverse itself, rather than being in the editor to collect something right within your WordPress editor, But if you're browsing over on the Openverse search engine itself, how to get that onto your site, I don't press this wouldn't work because you would have to tell it what your site is. But we could resurrect a bookmarklet.
For a fact.
It's
Make it
still
cool
in
again.
there, sort of. You have to, I think, get a plugin or something for it now, but
Yeah, this is tough stuff to figure out. I just keep thinking about like current, like next generation as well, because if media is not easy to use on a WordPress site, like I really think we'll lose a lot of folks to other services. And then also using your own, like then you get into like how can you use your own media with ease as well. Because I do think, I know personally, and a lot of friends I have, they don't feel super comfortable reusing sometimes things across the web because they're like, oh, this is probably used everywhere. Like I want to be an individual. I want my photos. So there's also that element to it that I think, I don't know, is interesting to think about, where it's like, how do we allow for individuation, and like where Openverse could be seen as, I don't want to just use stock imagery. Like that's, I had a friend who was building a site where she was like, can I use your photos? Because I know that they're not all over the web. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like I'll send you some. Like, what are you looking for? My dad does the same thing. He messages me all the time with photo requests because he just doesn't necessarily want to use something that's everywhere. So I think that's also like an interesting cultural context, that we're so into our own media. And if you're not in a Tumblr-like headspace, which like is the main place I reblog, I do not reblog anything on my personal site, for example. So there's also that piece, which could tie in really nicely with uploading photos to Openverse, and for people who don't care, it can work well. But that's something that's always in the back of my mind. So that could be a cool thing too, is like sort by least used. Like that could also be like something that people might want, actually, is to seek out images that aren't used as much, which might sound strange, but I do think is something that I've seen. And I think on the attribution side too, I've been reading a lot about like the next generation coming up, and there is a move towards more awareness around like that kind of dynamic of content being stolen, as I was speaking about before, where I think it actually could be tied in really nicely with people actually using attribution proudly, as long as it looks like, I think the idea of having it match theme styles is perfect. Like that would be a huge it's not small, but like kind of magical, like, oh cool, I don't have to even change this so it doesn't look janky. I think that would go a really long way to lower the barrier of entry for people to like keep that there and still use the image. Because otherwise, if it looks really bizarre, like people are going to be like, I am not using this. And it's like the first time experience of using Openverse, and that moment where you add an image in and what the attribution looks like will be huge in my mind. As well as the performance. Does it take a really long time? Because people are very impatient.
I do want to bring one thing up that's the antithesis of this conversation, but I also think that we need to be cognizant about providing a very simple way for people to disable Openverse. Because it's one of those things where it should be like very easy to do, like with a filter. And if we don't, there are certain members of this community that will explode. So I think that just making sure that that's baked in at the get-go will be a huge benefit. Not that we want to be able to disabling new cool features, but having the ability there, I think, is kind of core to the WordPress ethos and makes sense.
I totally agree. I think that came up with the pattern directory too, where people are like, I do not do this. Like, yeah.
They'll come around eventually, but in the beginning, they may want to disable it.
Sweet. We're at about 45 minutes. So I was actually thinking of, I don't know if anyone has some final thoughts or anything, but I like to be mindful of time. Otherwise, I'll be on here for 3 hours.
Any main points you want me to drill in on if I'm leading a group through testing on Friday?
Wow.
Right now I think last I looked, there were about 40 people signed up.
Oh, it's sweet. That is awesome. That is great. Thank you so much for doing that too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You know that only like 25% or something actually show up. So there's that.
Yeah. No, it's still,
and this one is a no replay, because I will record and give a recording then for demonstrating if we find a thing.
Yeah, I will say that I think a lot of this, the conversation we're having around attribution, because right now there's not necessarily like easy designs for that, but I think getting people's thoughts on it or talking about it, and going through the flow of using an external image on a site, I think would be really neat to go through, and like what the experience is like currently. I know Francisco, I imagine that'll be helpful from the Openverse side as well.
Yeah.
I will say, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you're using the site editor and you add an image, the image cropping tools are broken. There is an open issue. There is underway, but like that, I would avoid that because you're just going to end up having a super broken experience and being like, what is going on? So that might be one if you're going to.
Do you want me to, would you want me to drop in Gutenberg plugin if I make I'll probably use local WP and give a zip?
Yeah, you could use the Gutenberg plugin. I think that's fine.
Because that should probably fix it if they've already patched it ahead.
It's not patched yet.
Oh,
yeah.
I can ask George if if they
I'll
still
drop a
haven't
link
patched it in future versions. That's an ouch.
Yeah, I'm like, so yeah, just don't use image cropping in the site editor. I would use it in the post editor. So that's something I would avoid to streamline, because I'm just imagining you going through that call for testing and trying to crop something in the site editor. I found this as part of coming up with this test and just kind of kept it in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then stuff around featured images is the only other thing that comes to mind, is like talking through kind of some of the issues with like rethinking the featured image. What if you could scale it and have them all be the same size and have a neat like grid? Like, I think just kind of talking about the concepts of featured image, because I think that is new for folks to be able to manipulate that. So in terms of user education, I think that's huge. But thank you for asking. Yeah.
Yes. If anyone else has suggestions and they want people to test it a certain way, I think featured image and query loop block would be nice to lock up to certain dimensions.
Yes. That's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. That's a common page builder thing to do. So
and like adding duotone and stuff, I think is also pretty neat. So Cool. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to write a recap and upload this as well. But thank you all so much. It's super interesting, and keep sharing feedback, even if it's not in line with the questions about media on that post. I welcome all of it. I try to have those posts be guided in terms of if you don't, so you're not operating on a blank slate, but I also welcome all sorts of feedback. Please don't be shy, because we need it to get where we need to go, and for, the open web to be easier to use than some of these other services. So thank you all so much. I'm going to stop recording.